Nobody in Millbrook, Ohio believed that the quiet old woman living alone at the end of Chestnut Lane had ever done anything remarkable in her 82 years. And that was exactly the way Eleanor Grayson wanted it, because the truth buried inside her small, sagging farmhouse was something she had sworn to take to her grave, until the night a stranger knocked on her door, holding a folder that would change everything. Eleanor had lived in that house since 1968, raising two children mostly alone after her husband Walter left for a construction job in Cleveland, and simply never came back. No letter, no phone call, nothing but silence that swallowed years of her life. The neighbors on Chestnut Lane knew her as the woman who fed stray cats on her porch, who grew tomatoes nobody could ever get to taste as good, who waved politely but never lingered to talk, and who always seemed to be watching the road as if waiting for someone who was never going to arrive. Her daughter Marie, now nearly 60 herself, lived 2 states away and called every Sunday out of duty more than warmth, because something had always felt closed off about her mother, a locked room in her heart that no one had ever been allowed to enter. Her son Daniel had passed away 11 years earlier from a heart attack at only 49, and after that Eleanor stopped answering her door for almost a year, existing in that farmhouse like a ghost haunting her own life, and the town, in its quiet way, simply assumed she was waiting to die. But on a cold October evening, as rain tapped against her kitchen window and the old floorboards groaned under her slippered feet, a black car pulled into her gravel driveway, and a young man in a gray suit stepped out, holding an umbrella and a leather folder. And when Eleanor opened the door, he asked a single question that made her hand tremble on the frame. "Are you the daughter of Arthur Whitfield?" She hadn't heard that name spoken aloud in over 50 years, and for a moment she considered lying, considered shutting the door and pretending she'd misheard him. But something in his eyes told her this moment had been coming for a long time, whether she wanted it or not. She let him in, made 2 cups of coffee neither of them touched, and listened as he explained that he was an attorney, representing an estate that had been frozen in probate court for decades, an estate belonging to a man named Arthur Whitfield, a wealthy landowner from Kentucky, who had died in 1957 without ever publicly acknowledging the daughter he'd fathered outside of his marriage, a daughter he had quietly supported with monthly payments, funneled through a family friend, until the payments abruptly stopped the year Eleanor turned 17. The attorney explained that a decades-long legal dispute among Whitfield's legitimate heirs had finally been resolved after the last surviving grandchild passed away without children of his own, and that a court-ordered search for any remaining bloodline had led investigators through old adoption records, faded correspondence, and a birth certificate that had been sealed for over 60 years, a birth certificate with Eleanor's real name on it, not the one she had used since childhood, but the one her mother had given her before shame forced the family to change it. Eleanor sat frozen at her kitchen table as the young attorney slid the folder toward her, explaining that the estate, land, mineral rights, and decades of accumulated interest now legally belonged to her, and that after taxes and fees, the total came to just over $1.1 million, a number so large that Eleanor laughed out loud, a broken, disbelieving laugh that quickly turned into tears she hadn't let herself cry in years. She asked him why now, why after everything. Why did the truth choose to arrive only after she had buried her son, and spent most of her life believing she had been abandoned twice, once by her father and once by fate itself? And the attorney, gentle but honest, told her that legal systems move slowly, that shame moves even slower, and that sometimes the truth waits until the people holding on to old secrets are finally gone before it allows itself to surface. That night, after the attorney left, Eleanor sat alone in her dim kitchen, holding the folder against her chest, staring at the framed photograph of Daniel on her refrigerator, wishing more than anything that this money had come while he was still alive to see it, still alive to know his mother wasn't the failure she always believed herself to be, still alive to understand that being poor and being unworthy were never the same thing. She thought of all the nights she skipped dinner so her children could eat, all the winters she wore the same coat for a decade, all the birthdays she quietly cried through because she couldn't afford the gifts she wanted to give. And now, decades too late, an enormous fortune sat in her lap, like a cruel joke from a universe that had finally decided to apologize. But as the days passed, and the shock settled into something steadier, Eleanor began to see the money differently, not as an apology, but as a tool, a final chance to rewrite the ending of a story she had assumed was already finished. She called Marie, and for the first time in years, their conversation wasn't rushed or distant. It was raw, honest, and full of tears neither of them tried to hide. as Eleanor finally told her daughter the truth about her grandfather, about the shame that had shaped every decision of her life, and about the man she had spent decades pretending never existed. She used part of the money to pay off Marie's mortgage, part of it to fund a scholarship at Millbrook High School, in Daniel's name for students who had lost a parent young, and part of it to renovate the old farmhouse she had once been embarrassed to invite anyone into, replacing the sagging porch where she used to feed stray cats with a sturdy new one where, now, neighborhood kids gathered every afternoon to hear her stories. The same woman they used to whisper about was suddenly the warmest, most talked about person on Chestnut Lane. Word spread through Millbrook the way news always does in small towns, quietly at first, then all at once, and soon Eleanor Grayson wasn't known as the sad old widow at the end of the road. She was known as the woman who turned 80 years of silence into something that helped an entire community heal. One scholarship, one repaired roof, one Sunday dinner at a time. She never spent money on herself beyond fixing what was broken in her own home, choosing instead to sponsor winter coat drives, meal programs at the local shelter, and a small memorial garden planted behind the high school, where Daniel's name was engraved on a modest stone bench, a place where grieving families could sit quietly. Exactly the comfort Eleanor never had when she lost her own son. Reporters from a local news station eventually caught wind of the story and asked to interview her, expecting a tale of luck and fortune. But what they got instead was an 82-year-old woman calmly explaining that money can't undo decades of shame, but it can absolutely interrupt the cycle it creates, and that she would rather die broke and honest than rich and still hiding from herself. The interview aired only once on local television, but somehow clips of it spread further than anyone expected, not because of the size of her inheritance, but because of the raw honesty in her voice, when she said that being unwanted as a child had convinced her for 60 years that she wasn't allowed to want more for herself, and that discovering the truth at 82 taught her that it is never, ever too late to stop believing a lie you were told about your own worth. Eleanor passed away 3 years later, peacefully in her sleep, in the very bedroom where she had once cried herself to sleep, worrying about how she would feed her children the next morning. And at her funeral, the pews were filled not with strangers curious about her fortune, but with dozens of families she had quietly helped, students she had funded, and neighbors whose lives she had touched in her final years. All of them there not because of what she left behind financially, but because of who she had finally allowed herself to become before she ran out of time. And if there is one truth worth carrying away from Eleanor Grayson's life, it is this: the world may wait far too long to hand you the recognition, the love, or the justice you deserve, but the moment it finally arrives, no matter your age, no matter how much time you believe you've lost, you still have the power to turn it into something that outlives you.